I don't think you should censor anything we say. We should
I disagree with that. By the way, just my vote holds any weight here. There's some things I say.
Welcome back to Sermon Rewind. My name is Todd, and with me is just Jordan.
Good afternoon, Todd.
Hi.
How you doing, man?
Strictly average. Yourself?
Fair to middling.
Okay. We're still in Acts, to the ends of the earth.
We're going to be there for a while.
How long are we going to be? Is this sermon series almost done?
Oh, no. We're looking at a year altogether.
Okay.
Deep breaths.
I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to get tired of this book just because we're free-flowing the dialogue a little bit.
I was about to say, that makes me really sad. It's an amazing book.
Okay. We'll get to that.
All right.
Acts 3, verses 1 through 26. At least you're getting through with some big, hefty passages, right? Your big idea, the answer to our greatest need will always be available in Jesus.
Yeah.
You changed from the outline.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, you want to tell me why you added available in instead of just be in Jesus?
Yeah, so...
Or be Jesus, actually, it said. Will always be Jesus.
It's not that what I said before versus what I said towards the end, I agree with one over the other. It's that one is more indicative of putting a prompt underneath someone's seat to go and seek it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. You made a comment before I get to the points. You said, I think I wrote it down right. We get everything he knows, Jesus, we need.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
I sent this to you before. Spoiler alert, I do share questions with you ahead of time sometimes. So you can ponder a little bit. And I'd said that sounds kind of parental, right? Yeah. Which, of course, we shouldn't fault Jesus for being, since we do refer to.
More than that, we should be grateful for it.
Of course, right? But it does imply we don't know what we need sometimes.
Yeah.
Sort of like we are little kids.
Right.
Who mouth off or throw a tantrum, and the adult hopefully maintains kind of a calm composure and understands the immaturity of the child and just rolls with it and deals with it accordingly over time.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we have forgotten that we are children sometimes and that we just kind of do dumb stuff and are selfish and do throw tantrums? Or do you think we've reached a point, particularly if you've been in the church for a long time, that you convince yourself you're a mature Christian? You aren't really you're not really a child. You can acknowledge I'm a child of God abstractly.
Yeah.
But I'm not really a child. I'm a mature Christian. I'm like a adult child of God.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would ever say that they forget that, but I think that everyone would say that they think that the way that they react to things across a spectrum is mature. Right? I think everybody, even children, say that. They think that they're in the right and that their response is appropriate. So, yeah, I don't think it's that we forget that we're fallen or broken or immature or ignorant and as a result kind of blindly feeling about the room. But I think we always think that what we're doing is the best possible version of what we could be doing in that situation. And I think we say that ignorant. Though? I think we would say it. Whether or not we believe it or not, it's hard to tell, right?
Do you think there's a way for us to... Because there are times, certainly, where an adult will say, maybe to me, they'll say, hey, look, I'm sorry I said that to you, or I'm sorry I acted that way. Like they do something in a moment. Mm-hmm. They're under duress, emotional, whatever it is, and they do something, and then they come back a little later and say, hey, look, I'm sorry. I've been going through whatever. Right. And I say, hey, I get it. It's cool. Right?
Yeah.
How do we know if we are sort of in a longer rut of that, where we are just thinking about, maybe not acting out, but thinking like a child, thinking selfishly. What can I get out of this? What's my life going to be like? Sure. What am I doing this weekend? How come this doesn't all work for me? Type of thing. Do you think people get into those ruts as Christians, and how would we know that?
Yeah. Oh, I think we spend an obnoxious amount of our lives in that place. And I think it's because whether we realize it or not, I think it's because we disbelieve that God will give us not what our needs are, but what our wants are. And I think that's the difficulty, is deciphering between what is something I really, really want, or even why I want it, versus something that I'm absolutely desperate for and can't survive without. James chapter 4 talks about you have not because you ask not, and when you ask for it, you don't get it because what you would get, you ultimately intend to spend on your own desires or passions, right? It's this picture of like selfish behavior. When the person gets on their knees and asks the Lord for an influx of cash, it isn't necessarily because they're broke, despondent, and have nothing to eat. That does happen sometimes, but it's usually because they're deep down inside, they're like, man, if I could just get over this hump, then I could do X, Y, and Z. It doesn't mean that those things are always bad, but it is a human being operating primarily out of selfish intent. Now, like I said a moment ago, that's not always the case. There are certainly people that are praying faithfully out of desperate places, right? Praying for legitimate, wholehearted needs. I'm hungry. My marriage is falling apart. My kids are running amok and I do not know what to do. I've lost someone so close to me and my heart is breaking and I don't know how to come up for air. Like those are real legitimate prayers. And I would say in some respects, as far as we can perceive it, those are needs. The question is always, is that need, so significant that the Lord sees fit to absolutely bring us out of it, right? That's the big question, because there's a lot of needs, perceived or otherwise, that the Lord says, yep, you do need that. And there's going to be an incredible transformation of your life by my not giving it to you. And here's what that is going to look like.
So in your first point, you said never underestimate how great our need really is. I feel like that's one of those things, again, that people are going to sort of nod at. But do we have any idea how great our need is? Honestly, like we've come up with this nice little phrase, total depravity in reforming theology, but it makes it tidy. Do we have any concept what total depravity really is?
Probably not.
An absolute dependency on God.
Right.
Everything we do, every thought, action, whatever, stems from a sinful nature and is ultimately about benefiting ourselves.
Yeah. This is one of those moments where I'm not going to push back on that statement. I think that you're probably onto something. No, I would think we don't even have the slightest understanding of it. And that's why I think Jesus, when praying from the cross, as he's being nailed to it, says, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they're doing. They have no concept for just how deep this goes. They have no idea how severe their actions are. I mean, it's one thing to just be executing an innocent person. That's one like deep, dark cavern that most of us don't know. But you're brutalizing the Son of God, right? So there's a sense in which they don't know how broken they are. They don't know how off track they are. They don't know how messed up they are. And I think that reverberates through each and every generation. I don't think we know how desperately we need Jesus. I think we'd like to think we do. I think if you were to sit someone down in front of you right now instead of me from our congregation and say, do you have any idea how depraved and how desperate you are in need of Jesus? And I'm sure because they've been trained to know how to respond to that, they'd say yes, right? And maybe they even mean it. But no, we have no idea. We have no idea how bad the fracture is.
So I'm not going to pose this as a question, but I'll just make a statement that we could probably talk about the other end of the spectrum as well, about people that really loathe themselves so much, have done a lot of things in their life that struggle to accept the idea of grace, right? They can live in the sort of the depravity piece because they find it hard to understand how anyone could forgive what they've done.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of an opposite challenge. Probably a lot of people in the church don't necessarily, if they do struggle with that, they don't verbalize that too much.
Sure.
Because we're supposed to say, of course, I'm sinful by nature. Oh, of course I don't have good intentions. But we do think of ourselves as not bad people.
Yeah,
sure. We will stand there and say, well, sure, I sin and sure I have some bad thoughts, but at least I don't.
Right.
These
Everybody
things.
has that sliding scale, right?
Sure.
I'm not hurting people per se, right? So here's the worst possible thing. And I'm somewhere around here. So I'm pretty good by average.
Right. Yeah, and at least what I've seen over the years is that we say sin is sin, but we certainly rank them.
Oh,
we spend a lot of energy on certain sins, and then there's other sins that we know are there and might actually be prevalent, even within the church. But because so many people do them, and they feel like sort of lesser in a lot of ways, we kind of put up with it.
Yeah.
Your second point, never forget that Jesus alone can fill that need. So this is an interesting thing because you talked about, people in different difficult situations, right? Yeah, you can pray for healing, but ultimately Jesus is all you need. Yeah, you can pray for, comfort or peace, sorrow, that sort of stuff. Is it wrong to just sort of verbalize this in our mind, for this to be a cognitive thing, even if we're not truly feeling it, right? Because like there's people that are in pain, whether it's physical pain, whether it's emotional pain, and pain to the point where it's fairly constant.
Yeah.
Like all day, every day, something is there that just sort of reminds them that they are not whole. They can say over and over again, okay, all I need is Jesus. This world is, it's got a timetable. My life is short. Just got to focus on that.
Yeah.
But not feeling it.
Yeah.
Is that okay as a Christian? Should we just, like a chant, almost,
I get where you're going
all
with
is
this.
well, even though I'm not really, I would have a hard time in my heart saying that with great enthusiasm sometimes.
I would strongly dissuade that kind of behavior, to be honest, and for two reasons. First, I would dissuade it because like mantras are meant to eventually trick you, right? Like constant repetitive motion, constant repetitive statements are meant to be so ingrained in your mind that they become like knee jerk. So that you are like, when you feel pain, coming to mind immediately is this thing that you want to remember. I don't think it's necessarily bad in theory, but here's the second part of it. We're not talking about a philosophy, right? Our faith is not built around this kind of lovely potential idea that there at one point in history past was a God out there that we think probably cared about us. No, the whole story of Christianity is that while Christ died, he rose again and is currently living, breathing, seated at the right hand of the Father, interceding on our very behalf. So we're not talking about a philosophy. We're not talking about a great idea. We're talking about an actual person in whom we relate with. So I don't want people saying repetitive things when they're in pain and suffering as if that somehow has some kind of magical, incantal powers to it. No, I want people to say, Jesus, I know you hear me. You've got to hear me. I'm suffering here. I'm dying here. My insides are being turned out. Like my heart is never not breaking. I would rather them continue to press in, believing that there is a person on the other end of the line who has something they can do about it. Now, I can't.
Okay, but
go ahead.
But you're talking about. I probably should phrase that differently. I'm not talking about catchphrases or refrigerator magnets here.
Okay.
I'm talking more about spiritual discipline. I'm talking more about what you're talking about.
Sure.
If you pray the prayer over and over again, in a moment of physical, emotional, spiritual pain, if you pray the prayer and say, God help me in my unbelief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's ritualistic. You could call it a mantra just to phrase it that way, but it could just be a prayer, right? Is it okay to keep praying that? And is it okay to ask for something? Or should we just keep saying, God, your will be done. You're all I need. As opposed to saying, God, I'm hurting.
Yeah.
I want to be free from pain.
Yeah.
Is that selfish?
No. A desire for things to be whole is never selfish. A child is not considered selfish when they ask their father for bread. A child is not considered selfish when they ask their father for a hug or for love or for attention. Those things are right, good, and natural. And even Jesus recognizes that and encourages the disciples to do the same. I would rather come in from the other spectrum and say, it's most honoring to our Father if we spend the rest of our days going back to him over and over and over and over again. As a parent, imagine if you knew your child was suffering significantly in any number of ways, and they felt like they were such a burden to you that they didn't see the need to continue going to you anymore. That would crush you as a father because even though you're not, replete to an endless degree, you want to be present in whatever way you can. You want to be dad in whatever way that you can. And so I don't think this is any different. I think there's a constant call within Scripture for Christians to regularly return to their fountain and hope. So again, I can never speak into the fact of whether or not God's timetable is going to align with ours or if his healing is going to look the same way our healing. But God desires for his children to keep coming back to him. So I would never dissuade someone from doing that. I don't think it's selfish at all. You read that Paul returned to the Lord 3 times, asking him to remove the thorn from the flesh. Well, I don't know that we're talking about a literal 3 times. 3 times is this circular reasoning, right? It means that he regularly went back and begged him for the same thing over and over. And we should do the same.
But that feeds us into the third point. Never despise how Jesus chooses to fill that need forever.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, it's one of those things that people can nod at, right?
Yeah.
And probably it's easier to nod at when you're not going through some sort of storm.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because spiritually, biblically, yes, you could stand up there and say, look, maybe God's going to just allow you to be in pain forever.
Yeah.
I mean, I have friends, I think about friends, several friends of mine who have lost children.
Yeah.
They're going to be sad forever.
Lord have mercy.
Yeah. They are. There's no moving on. There's no getting over.
Right.
They're going to be sad forever.
Yeah.
And I hurt for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of the struggle. I don't necessarily have a question about this. It's more just kind of a statement, right? I mean, I think the Christian life, sometimes we struggle with the lament piece. Like we're supposed to have a good attitude,
yeah,
right?
Because no one teaches us how to do that.
No, but I think also I struggle with that too, because it's a question of how much should we be focusing on our own needs, right? Because like if you ask me how I'm doing and I'm in pain, there's part of me that says, sure, I'll tell you how I'm doing because I am in pain. But there's also part of me that says, I should not despise how Jesus chooses to fill that need forever.
Yeah.
He has not addressed that right now for his glory. I wish I knew why. I wish I knew when it might end, if ever, right? So then should I lament to you? Should I say, yeah, this sucks. I'm unhappy right now. I'm not just feeling the joy of Jesus because I'm struggling. And I know a number of people that, when we talk about these concepts, they'll verbalize that. Like they'll say, yeah, I heard this sermon, they talked about this. And part of my brain just sort of said, yeah, I know, but it just feels hollow. It feels cliche.
Yeah.
To just say, oh, sure, I'll just take my, giant hole in my heart and just fill it up. Right.
But I think you'd have to own the fact that I certainly didn't say that.
No, I know. I'm not saying you're saying that.
I know you're not. I'm just saying, like, I don't think there is any expectation of that. And I know you're not asking a question, but I think for the sake of our viewers, it's important that they hear it. Yes, you should lament. And even if it's permanently, right? We have a responsibility in the context of the Christian church, which is, again, yet another reason why I think the body's so important, to bear one another's burdens, right? I need to know when Todd suffers, and Todd needs to know when I suffer. Like giving pat answers for the very, general state of our lives isn't very helpful. Like we need to learn what it's like to shoulder the weight with each other as best as we can so that we might endure the life together faithfully. And I don't think not being human is somehow an appropriate response, because I would imagine that Jesus knows how phony that could be, right? If we were to say, well, is it any good for us to continue lamenting and knowing that he's going to ultimately fix it someday when we really want it fixed now? Yes. And I think that builds a deeper expectation into things like the kingdom coming and the resurrection, which is soon in ours, right? I think there is a way in which our lament builds our hope and expectation in all of the right ways. And so distancing ourselves from it does us no good. Living into it, being truly honest, truly human, truly broken people is a really, really important part of who we are.
Yeah, but I think you said it. We haven't learned how to do that sometimes.
Oh, no, the church has done a terrible job of that.
And you and I have talked about this at length about like when our corporate gatherings, we do tend to focus on joy pieces, which is also fine. We can focus on joy and gratitude. We have bits of confession. We have, I will acknowledge at Bethany, we have extended our confession time just a smidge, right? Yeah. But we haven't necessarily added like, I mean, you do say cry out to Jesus, right? That can be lament as well.
Yeah.
But it's awkward, right? When someone just all of a sudden breaks down and just bursts into tears, everyone's looking at the floor and like, what the heck am I supposed to do now?
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't necessarily know, we don't know what to do with that as a body. So I think it's a good point in terms of balance. Okay.
That's true.
Thanks
which is why familiarity would be so great for us.
Yeah.
Right?
And again, it's something that we have to work on over time.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thanks very much.
Not a problem.
Thanks again for joining us on Sermon Rewind. Join us Sunday mornings if you're in the area, 10 o'clock in Bellflower. We're also here on Wednesday nights at 5:45 for dinner and activities for all ages. And we mean that. Thanks again for watching on Sermon Rewind.
See you soon.